Hi, and welcome back to the Vixen Voice. I am so excited because today we are talking to Andrea Hudy. And it's a little bit different talk because it's incredible that Andrea could find time out of her busy schedule to talk to us. She is actually the director of sports performance for women's basketball at UConn. So, what an iconic program, right? You can tell how busy Andrea is right now, but she loved that we're here to inspire our audience to think outside of the box, to really go for your dreams. And she really wanted to have this conversation with all of you today. So, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited. It's exciting to be able to draw parallels between what we deal with in sport and what you deal with in business. Same thing.
I I love it. Thank you so much. Yeah. And just to let you know a little bit more about what a badass we're talking to today. So Andrea has helped her different teams win 8 national champions. She's had over 85 players go to the NBA, and I love this part, the WNBA. So we're definitely going to talk about that today. So not only has she worked with the UConn program, but she's worked with the Longhorns in Texas and the Jayhawks in Kansas as well. So, it's been quite a career. And Andrea, we're so excited again to talk to you today. And what I love about Andrea, in the little time I've known her, she was introduced to me by Lexi on our team, who's our client concierge, who's been in basketball as well. And Andrea, obviously, you're going to see that she has a really beautiful silent humility. So I can't wait to dig in and really learn more about this amazing woman in front of us here today. So, Andrea, again, welcome.
Thank you. I didn't know that I had silent humility. That's
That's what I
great.
feel from you. So I like to give praise when praise is due, right? It has to be authentic, but I think we women need to get better at lifting each other up, and that's really a big proponent of the Vixen Gathering. So I really love to dive into people's strengths, and I think it's going to come across on our interview today. So I can't wait for you to watch it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, let's kind of dig in. What I'd love to hear from you is, if was there a pivotal moment in your life, Andrea? I know, you played sports, you played volleyball in college, you've been in the sports industry, and we know how much time that takes. It's super high performance. You really have to cultivate your life to do the work you do. So, was there a pivotal moment when you were growing up or in your life that has really cultivated this amazing woman that we see sitting before us today?
Well, I would say there were plenty of pivotal points, but looking at the most recent one was probably when I was working with the Kansas men's basketball team. And what was cool was the Wall Street Journal called me Kansas basketball's secret weapon.
I love it.
And so then I have to wrap my head around what that is, because I'm like, why would I be, secret weapon for a men's basketball team? And I think this is a cool lead into is core values are my secret weapon, and
Love it.
being authentic and having a great set of core values that you don't deviate from, that you always fall back on. I think that's the utmost important. It was pivotal too because I got a lot of recognition. And then you have to sit back and say, well, why did I get that recognition, and question it, right? Because I think I have to question everything that happens and reevaluate what we do every day. So that was pretty pivotal.
I love that. There's so much there that I'd love to unpack. So, first of all, what I'd like to ask, because at the Vixen Gathering, first thing I do with my clients, well, the very first thing I do is time management to help them find more hours on their calendar so they can do the work. Second is core values. I think it's so important to know who you are and have personal core values. Would you mind sharing with us what your core values are?
Yeah, I have 4 of them that I've defined, but I
Awesome.
also want to bring the attention to the fact that what makes you strong can make you weak also. So
Yes.
these things, there's a fine dynamic in there that you have to juggle for sure. So mine are persistence, integrity, passion, and courage.
So I got
It,
persistence, integrity, passion. I want to make sure I get these down, and courage, right?
yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
But with that, right, I thought I was always persistent and I was coming across as being persistent. but I didn't realize that a lot of people were like, well, she's stubborn. So it
Yes.
depends on how you come across. So that's just the opposite of it almost in a way. And then being rigid, can you, can you bend the rules a little bit for yourself and operate within an environment differently, but still, have integrity? And then passion, I get really excited about what I do, but not everybody's excited about exercise. So, can I be calm in this situation? And then courage, the opposite of courage. This is Brene Brown. It goes, she talks about
Yeah.
vulnerability. You have to be vulnerable
Yeah.
to be able to show courage or have courage.
Well, and I think to be a leader in anything, being a business owner, being a coach, like it's so important in today's world to have that vulnerable side, but there's also a fine line, right? Because you have to keep the authority at the same time. So I think it's actually one of the most difficult things to balance in today's world. So would you mind sharing some tips about how you walk that fine line?
Um, I think experience helps you
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to walk that line and who your audience is or who you're the audience to. And you have to be able
Yep.
to, I guess, navigate that the best way that you can. And then if you
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to navigate it, ask questions.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I try to remind my clients all the time is we are human beings. We are gonna screw up sometimes. Sometimes we're gonna, so the important thing is not beating yourself up, saying, okay, what went right about this? I like to go to wins first, and then what could I do better next time, right?
Yeah.
So that
I think,
analysis.
yeah, Aristotle has a quote that, or was it Aristotle? Whoever it is, I'll figure it out. I'll find out for you. But
Awesome.
you either win or you get better or you learn. So
Yes.
you either win or learn. You don't
I
lose.
love that. I love that. Kind of like there's a saying, there is no failure. There's either winning or learning a lesson.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I love it. So I want to know, I love that you went straight to core values because I talk about this so much. And I love that you've really based your career and your life upon those. So, question for you. Do you feel that today you have the same core values you had when you were playing volleyball in college or first starting your career?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think I've wavered, but it's okay to change your core values
Yep.
too. You learn, right? So I think I've always just stuck with that because it's easy
Hmm.
to fall back on those things. Super easy.
I agree, and I have a belief that we were put on this earth to do something, right? And really knowing ourselves tells us what our purpose is, and it might to be the funniest person in the room and bring joy to people's lives, and it might be to be head of a exercise program at a college and make impact through other ways, right? But if we don't know who we are, how can we serve that purpose? Because it's not the purpose of our significant other. It's not our parents' purpose. It's not our kids' purpose, right? So it seems to me that you've been very good at kind of staying on purpose during your career. Would you agree with that? Or have there been times that that was challenging?
There are times when it's challenging, but being in a higher education setting for my whole career, you have to operate within, and especially being part of a team, you kind of have to operate with those rules and
Yeah.
be and have integrity. So, and integrity, I think, is scary for some people because, it's hard to fight somebody who's always trying to do the right thing.
That is true.
It's like,
I love that. That might be my favorite new quote. There's nowhere to go with that one, right? Love it. So, if it's okay with you, I want to circle back to your story when you said, it was the New York Times, right, that called you
Wall Street
the
Journal.
Wall Street Journal. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
called you the secret weapon. So, you said you had to really pause and figure out what that meant. So, walk us through that situation. Like, how did it make you feel? Did you have any ahas from that?
Well, I think again the aha was I had to find out what they were talking about, right? Because it was like they're really good basketball players and we
Yeah.
had really great coaches. And
Yeah.
then I got a lot of attention for being this secret weapon. And I was like, "Ooh." And I'm supposed to be behind the scenes doing my job. And it was humbling in a way because I was like, what? I didn't know that I was such an integral part of it.
Yeah.
But it was cool to be recognized. But then I'm like, what makes me a secret weapon? And, having time to sit and pause. And I haven't changed who I've been. But
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough to know what I wanted to do since I was little. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I haven't had to change.
I love that. That's amazing. So every day, you're basically helping athletes become their best, right? So, are there any, mindset tips, tenacity tips, anything you can share with our audience? Like, we specifically talk to Gen Xers, and as a Gen X female, I can tell you that I was very good at my fitness and health regime until 2020, and it's been a juggle since then. So, what do you feel are kind of the keys to consistency and being committed?
Yeah, consistency is the key,
Okay.
because sometimes, you don't feel like working out, but if you
Yeah.
just take the steps and do what you can at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and this goes back to, I wrote this down. I talked to a neuroscientist one time and I said, how do you define mental toughness?
Yeah.
And people want to throw that around all the time in sports, but it's everywhere. So what is mental toughness? And then people can't define it. But what she defined it and how she defined it was mental toughness is the ability to try your best, fail, and forgive yourself
I
and do
like it.
better the next day. And that's toughness. That's persistence. That's just keep on going in the route that you're going, and let's just
Yeah.
forge ahead. So the ability to forgive yourself and not Google has I think on the wall when you walk into Google it says done is better than perfect. So I
Mm-hmm.
think people need to realize that you have to it's not going to be perfect and you have to just keep forging forward.
I like it because I don't know if the tech industry still uses this term, but from a couple of years ago, they would talk about just ship the code, which meant like, we got to get it out there. We can do the bug fixes later. We can fix all that. Let's just get it out there. And I share with my team a lot like, okay, let's ship the code. Like it's time to go. Let's get it out. So I
Yeah.
love this done is better than perfect. And going back to self forgiveness, this is interesting that you bring that up to mental toughness because it's one of the core values that I help our clients with because I feel like it's so needed in today's world. And so many equate like self forgiveness and self love to weakness. And I love that you've said, okay, mental toughness is actually forgiving yourself. So I'd really like to talk about that more. But do you work with your athletes on this concept, or do you have a practice yourself to help you forgive yourself?
Yesterday I was talking with the women about recovery and not just physical recovery, which is important in sport, and in life, but about mental stress recovery. So do you
Yep.
meditate? Do you take time to be like, what was that? And does it really matter in the grand scheme of things that I'm fretting over it? So how do you do the mental emotional recovery parts of when you're stressed? Stress is good. Stress is a
Mm-hmm.
really great thing physically, mentally, emotionally. Environmental stresses are great, but can you stress yourself and then recover from it? And that's where the consistency part comes in because you should stress yourself every day in some form. And I think where people get in trouble is when they're not consistent because I study force production and how force production changes daily. Some days you get out of bed and you're like, let's go attack the world. And then the next day you wake up and you're like, oh, well, okay, we can't operate like that. We need to find a place in between and consistently build on where we are daily because your behaviors are going to determine, what the outcome is.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And that term you used is force production, right? I wrote that
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
Okay.
That's how when you walk, you're producing force against the ground. But
I
some
like
days
it.
you walk with a limp, or some days you're a little slower than others. But consistency is important because if you're not the same person every day,
Mm-hmm.
it's tough to build skills. And now we could talk business skills, but I'm talking
Yeah.
about basketball skills. So I'm like, if you're not consistent every day, you might as well go practice your free throws underhand because it's going to be different every day. And it
Yeah.
can't be different if you want to get really good at something.
I like it. So when you're helping with consistency, is it maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say like it it's I get the concept that it's understanding that, you're not going to be a force of nature every day, right? But
Right.
you also don't want to bring yourself down to a certain level. So, how do you help, your athletes, and how in your life do you find that balance between the two?
Yeah, I don't know if there is balance.
I know, I agree.
But it's deliberate practice and being
Okay.
intentful with and having intention to what you're doing because the last thing I want these athletes to do is come in the weight room and lift weights and they're talking about what they did last night or what they're thinking about. They
Yep.
have to be present. They have to have their feet on the ground. They have to feel what they're supposed to feel. And we operate on like a minimal dose and look at the response from what we do in the weight room, but it has to be intentional. You have to use your
Hmm.
brain. You can't just get on an elliptical and read a book. You know, it needs to be intense. It needs
Yeah,
to be stressful if we want to get better. So we just try to be edgy on our threshold every day. Like some
I
days you
like
can
that.
push and push past the threshold. Some days you just get to the threshold and then you operate better on the next day. So we just like to be at the upper end of that threshold and recover from it.
Nice.
It's taken 2 years of deliberate work almost every day to get to a place where we are right now that I feel comfortable that these athletes are getting healthier and they're getting to a place where we build robustness and
Hmm.
can compete at a really high level. So it's daily, consistent, intentful practice.
I like it. Yeah, I love bringing the intention in because I think that's true of everything in life. Even with like high performance and work, science shows that high performers take breaks every 52 minutes and they take 2 minutes to refresh, reset, and reset their intention for the next hour, what they're going to accomplish, right? And
Yeah.
I think in today's world, so many people are hopping from Zoom to this or that, that we are not giving ourselves those couple of minutes to be human beings and reset and focus on what we need to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
A
with it,
nap is a good reset too.
oh, yes, I just looked outside when you said nap because my new favorite thing is I'm in Nashville and I'm in a high rise and I have a balcony right here. So, I'll take a 20-minute nap on the balcony and just feel the wind blowing in the afternoon. It's my new like self care. I love it. I love it. So, do you encourage your athletes to take naps?
Yes, absolutely.
I love
I
it.
would, we do a lot of education and educating the athlete and educating myself in terms of sleep and recovery.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound crazy because I bet some of you guys don't even get 6 hours a night. But if you're stressed, and physically, emotionally can be argued the same thing. So we try to get them to practice 8 to 10 hours of sleep a
Yeah.
night.
Yeah. I love this topic because when I was getting certified as a high performance coach, they actually recommended 8 to 9 hours, and I'm a stickler about 8 hours. Like I have to go to bed early because I wake up early, and I was like, oh, let me try this 9 hours. And for me personally, I was groggy for longer in the morning. Like I did it for 2 weeks. And so I said, okay, I'm going back to my 8 hours. So I feel like we all have different biorhythms, but do you think that's the case or I just needed longer to adapt? Because I was playing with my sleep.
No, I think some people, it changes between people how much sleep you
Hmm.
need, but just as a general rule, most people are 8 to 10,
I
or
like it.
you should get 8 to 10. But I know some high level people that get 3 or 4 and they're fine.
Yeah, which is crazy to me. I can't imagine that. I mean, back in the day when I was in law school, I could do that, but now I'm
I
like,
know,
no
right?
way. I love sleep. If I get to take a nap, it's like amazing.
Well,
So,
especially as we get older, it takes longer to recover.
Yeah.
and your system slows down. So you have to slow down a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. But I love you threw out there 8 to 10 hours because I'm sure some people are absolutely shocked, especially some of the women listening that are balancing young kids, owning a business,
Yeah.
everything else. So yes, when you can take naps and get your sleep in. So I think that's phenomenal advice. Um, Andrea, I know that you have a busy schedule, so I want to honor your time. I'd love to circle back just to learn a bit more about you, if that's okay. And my
Sure.
first question is, why do you do what you do, and what do you love about what you do?
Why do I do what I do? I grew up in a family of educators.
Mm-hmm.
My title is coach, but we don't get wins and losses in the weight room. I like to say we get results, and then the wins and losses happen on the court. So I
Yes.
identify as a teacher and an educator and someone who disperses information. Um, so that's kind of how I look at myself. Yeah, and always being in higher education, I love learning, and I've been a lifelong learner. So I came back to school here at 49 years old and started my PhD. So
Wow.
yeah, that's been fun, and it's cool because you get old enough that you can study what you want to study, and if you don't want
Yep.
to study, you don't study it. So um, yeah, and I have a lot of support with that.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. So I went to Vanderbilt 20 something years ago, right? And I just moved back to Nashville from Houston in January. And I kind of hit the wall one day this week and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm gonna go do something fun. And I just went and walked around Vanderbilt and I was like, oh my gosh, like it would be so cool to take classes out. And I thought about when I was a student and how I didn't appreciate what I had, right? And I really didn't take advantage of the learning. And I'm like, when you get older, you appreciate these things so much. And like the
Yeah,
subjects that I didn't like I really didn't like math and science. And now I'm fascinated by them. So I'm like, I wish, I had this time or opportunity. So I may be doing some re education as well. I love that you're getting your PhD. So
yeah.
when did you start your PhD program?
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was actually a way to provide more help with the athletes that I work with. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
mainly for me. It was like we have this great research institution here and we're not utilizing it. So I emailed some of the professors and I was like, hey, I was wondering if you can help me. Well, I didn't get great response. So
Oh,
then I was
wow.
like, well, how can I get great response? Is becoming a student. So now they have to respond. So I figured out
I
that
like it.
way to get the job done, but also it's benefiting me, but mainly it's benefiting the people that I work with. So it's been great.
That's so cool. So, what is your favorite part of your job?
Teaching, right?
Yeah.
Because hopefully the athletes that I'm working with, they have a 20-year career beyond college.
Mm-hmm.
Sue Bird, one of the best women's basketball players has ever been, she just retired. She spent, I mean, it's probably been at least, she's probably 42 years old, I would think. So she's spent 20 years in the WNBA, and she's one of the
Wow.
best players out there. Diana Taurasi is the same thing. So the fact that we're teaching lifelong skills, and
Mm-hmm.
people call it weight training, but the last thing I think about is how much you lift. It's what goes into it, because if you have a good set, you fail
Yeah.
in some instances. So can that failure build this resistance and or build the robustness and the resilience that we're trying to find in sport?
Yeah. And I'm imagining, I know with all collegiate athletes, I'm sure your job takes a lot of hours, right? Your
Yeah,
career.
it does. It's my life. I wake up in
Yeah.
the middle of the night and I think about it, so it's always on my mind. But again, I was fortunate enough to find my passion early and I
Yeah.
stuck with it.
Yeah. No, I love how much you give. So, share with us, how do you find time to balance life outside of work? Because I know you just said it's my life, so maybe you've made the choice not to, but what's important to you when you're not working or thinking about work?
Um, that's a great question. I like to cook.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like to walk myself or exercise myself. So,
Yep.
and the exercise for me has changed drastically over the last 30 years because, I used to do the exercises with the men and
Mm-hmm.
and compete with them. That's how I feel like got respect. So that's changed. I'll be 51. So it's tough to recover from some of these things that I'm asking these young kids to do. So how do I find balance? Um, yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily something that people ultimately end up with. Uh,
No.
so again, it's my passion. So I'm curious about it. I learn about it. I teach it,
Yeah.
and I try to get better at it every day. So
Yeah.
my balance is exercise, and exercise is always on my brain.
I love that. No, the best advice I got because I had access to someone who was pretty influential in the financial world when I was a financial advisor and mentor, and I asked him, you have a great life, and I mean, I'm single and work is kind of everything for me, and I love my family, my sister's kids, my brother's kids, everything. But I asked him, I said, how do you balance all this? And he said, April, there is no balance. Right now, I'm here at this conference. I'm giving 150% to being here at this conference and being who I am. Next week, I'm going to be skiing with my son, and I'm giving 150% to skiing with
Yeah.
my son. So I think what you talked about when you were talking about intention and being present, I think that's really more the key. Like when you find yourself doing something, and for those of us who high performance is important, be it in athletics or exercise, business or life, I think it's so important to us to give value that you have to show up. If you're not showing up at 100+%, how are you serving the people in front of you, right?
And yeah, it's a marriage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a relationship. I left one of my jobs because I felt like the relationship wasn't going the way that I wanted it to go.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you sacrifice that and find a new relationship.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, where's your value? That's the key term, is because are you undervalued? Are you overvalued? Or do you feel comfortable with your value?
Mm-hmm. I like that question. And I think that's important because what we've seen is a lot of women, especially since 2020, second guessing their career choice, their choice to stay home, whatever their choice is. And I think this concept of bringing value is really important. Last week, I interviewed my best friend who's a corporate event planner, and she found herself a stay at home mom unplanned because, of course, corporate events went by the wayside in 2020. And so she was actually sharing how, she became the best mom she could be and made her kids' life as fun as could be. But then she felt a part of her was missing. And that's why she went back to work, not for the money, but because she wanted the relationships with adults. So her business is very centered around having relationships. And
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to, and again, that's one of her core values. So knowing these core values are so important. Have you ever left a job, or I'm sure you used your core values when you make these decisions, but in that situation, do you think one of your core values was being violated or infringed upon when you left?
No, I think that one was, am I being valued? Because I felt,
Mm,
you know, again, I'm a woman in a man's world, and
yeah.
every job that unfortunately I've had, a male comes in after and they get paid more. And I was like, well, I was doing double the
Ah,
work, and now their work gets cut in half and they're paid the same or more. Like,
yeah.
come on, what are we doing? So, you know, uh, we're all replaceable,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I just, you live with it and you make the best of the next situation.
Yeah, I love that because one thing I love to talk to my clients about is owning your worth, right? Like, what's your ideal income? What does it break down hourly rate? And then you can make so many decisions on saying yes to no to personal things, business opportunities, etc. And I think it's such an important concept because it's not really about money, it's your time and energy, but that's a good way to put a numerical value to help, so you don't have guilt afterwards because so many of us struggle with this forgiveness that you talked about. I mean, I have a daily forgiveness practice I've been doing for a year and a half, forgiving myself daily, and it changes your life. But when I talk to other women about this, they're like, oh, yeah, I struggle with that. That's really tough. So I kind of wanted to circle back there. We chatted about, how do you find ways to move past if you feel a situation's been bad or you haven't performed your best? Like, what do you do to forgive yourself and move on?
Um, you never know what anybody else is thinking. You might think you know, but you don't know what anybody else is thinking. So I try to frame it in terms of what would my mentors do? How would they respond? I ask for advice. You talk to a life coach, you bring in the information and filter what you like and what you don't like and make a
Yeah.
decision from there. So, in being a woman in a man's world, I think we're
Yeah.
all women and men in a man's world. So
Yes.
how did they hold on to it? They don't hold on to it. So it's like, well, he's not thinking about it. Why am I thinking about it? So I think that's an easy way to wrap your head around it because we hold on to stuff. I do,
Yeah.
and let emotions get in the way, but guys don't, and they move on. And I think we should learn from that.
No, I love that point, and I wanted to circle back to your comment about being a woman in a man's world. So thank you. But I always say the way I explain it is men are so much better about compartmentalizing things than we women are. I feel, and like you said, with our core values, I like to say, the fact that we're so flexible and we can think about multiple things, it's like our superpower, but it's also our kryptonite, right? If
Yeah,
we
yeah.
don't put like a finite resource on it. And I think that's what you were sharing about your core values as well. You still have to understand how you're showing up and what your intention is. But yes, I agree with you. Men are so much better about compartmentalizing and leaving things behind. Like we women are just emotional creatures and we have to learn how to deal with our emotions. So,
Yeah.
is there something that you help your female athletes to do? Maybe do they struggle with the same thing? Like, do they tend to, beat themselves up a little bit longer than men do? Or I feel
Well,
like we can have high
yeah,
standards too.
I would say that, again, it's individual. I don't think it's gender necessarily, male
Yeah.
or female, but um, next play.
Yeah. I like
Next
it.
play. I mean, ball's coming at you. You got to think next play, or else you're going to get beat again. And then you're going to work yourself into a deeper hole. So
Yeah.
we always yell next play.
Yeah. I love it. So, any advice you would give? Because, like you said, many of us, I was a litigator. So, I was like, there was one partner out of 50 on my litigation team that was a woman when I started my career. Then I was in the financial industry, and 12 years ago, women made up 30% of the financial industry. Today, we make up 30% of the financial industry. So, there are these male dominated careers that I think we have to find our center in because one thing I picked up you said was you used to compete with the men to get respect. And, I can share with you at my first law firm, I thought I was successful because I was considered one of the boys, right? Like,
Yeah.
so at what point do we separate ourselves from this and say, okay, I'm a woman, I have different strengths, and I want to show up differently, and here's how I'm going to be?
Yeah, I think again, the only and in sports, a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
think that physical strength is the ultimate thing. Well,
Right.
I have my intellectual strength, I have my emotional strength, I have my experience. So you can play on whatever strength you feel is
Mm-hmm.
necessary. That's changed for me, for sure. Now I'm trying to teach these kids and be smart about what they're doing and how they're doing it and not just lift as much weight as you can. So, what strength do you want to rely on the most in a certain time period or in a certain setting?
I love that. So, what's my strength and what do I want to rely on? So, I think if people get a good set of core values and then figure out what their strength is and what impact they want to make, um, that's a pretty good way to show up in
Well,
today's world.
the Carnegie, they say that success is based on 85% interpersonal skills and 15% specific skills. So, what are the interpersonal relationships and how does that work? Do you have to be sharp mentally? Do you have to be sharp physically? I think that changes depending on the situation you're in.
I love that. Um, So when you look back over your career, what has been like, I don't want to say your favorite lesson, but what is something like you really learned or adapted to in your life that you can share with others?
I'll never regret hard work.
I like
You
it.
never regret doing too much or going over the top. Um, I think in those cases you learn a lot about yourself, and then you
Hmm.
learn a lot more than what you expect. So
Mm,
I love hard work.
yeah.
However
Uh,
that looks, it doesn't have to
yeah.
be physical. It could be mental, you know.
Yeah, I love that. So, Andrea, what do you think is next for you? Like, what is something, I know you're getting your PhD, but what is something else you'd like to learn or focus on? I can share with you my new project. I want to learn for myself to the degree I want to teach a course about it and write a book. And I call it graceful assertiveness, like learning how to be assertive, in a way that I feel good about. That's what I mean by graceful. I don't care what other people think, but where I don't feel like, ooh, I didn't come across well there. Kind of like you were talking about sometimes when you're intense, it comes across a different way.
Yeah.
So, is there something like that you're challenging yourself with or learning right now?
Yeah, when I was so I have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology. I have a
Mm-hmm.
master's degree in sport biomechanics, and then I have a MBA. So when I was at Kansas, I was like, okay, well, how can I challenge myself? And money rules the world. So I
Yeah.
thought, let me go over to the business school. But then I got into analyzing data and looking at data. More specifically in terms here with force production and how
Mm-hmm.
people respond to uh, the practice loads that we deal with. So I've been getting into data, technology, different softwares to really try to find trends.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like we said, not every day is your best day. It's like the stock market.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just trend up.
Well, and the cool thing about that is, the trends don't lie, and that's just the beginning of the search. I mean, it's the same like KPIs in business, right? Or the numbers you track. I love having a weekly scorecard in my business because I can see sooner rather than later when we go off trend. And sometimes it's 1 week, sometimes it's later, but like that number doesn't solve the problem. Then you have to be creative and intuitive and get to the bottom of the problem, right? So that's one lesson I had to learn in business because at first I just totally relied on my intuition and I doubled my business every year and it was awesome. And you get to a place where you just hit the ceiling and that only serves you so long, right? Then you have to
Yep.
get the business skills, you have to get the data. And so then when I first switched to that, I hated it. It was so uncomfortable for me. I didn't like it. And so I had to learn to blend my intuition with the data and the hard information to run business in a way that felt aligned for me. So that kind of leads me to another question I was curious to ask you because I know you've trained hard, you've worked hard, you've learned a lot, right? But where do you feel that your intuition comes in? How do you use your intuition in what you do daily?
Yeah, I actually had a Reiki woman that I used to work with, and
Yeah.
she was great, unbelievable work that she'd done. But I've really learned to just follow my intuition and understand my gut.
Yeah.
Is it an emotional, is it an ego
Yeah.
response? And yeah, I know when I'm making an ego decision.
I do too.
So I tend to, yeah, try to follow my gut and always do the right thing and have the health of the athlete first and foremost.
Yeah. I
Does
love
that
that.
answer your question?
That absolutely. There are no wrong answers on
Yeah.
this interview. I love to hear. I mean, one thing I hate about our society today is this clamp down on freedom of speech. I mean, you could sit here and have a totally different belief system than me, and I would be fascinated to understand why you believe that way because it challenges my beliefs, which then either strengthens them or makes them better, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think everyone deserves to be heard. So I love that you're so open and sharing with us. So I do want to honor your time, Andrea. I could talk to you for another hour. This has been fascinating. Thank you so much. But I know that you are very busy and on a schedule. So before we wrap up today, I like to ask all our guests, because I only interview women since it's the Vixen voice. And I wanted to ask you, we're all different as women, and that's what I love about Women and Celebrate. So if you had to share with our audience, what does femininity look like to you? And if you had to put a color to it, what would it be?
Yeah, I think my femininity changes daily and situationally,
Yeah.
depending on what I'm doing. Obviously, at work, lifting weights, it tends to go to the masculinity side of things.
Yeah.
But coaching women and being in a women's sport environment is not any different than being in a male sporting environment. It's
Yep.
really not, especially at somebody who really wants to make a professional career out of their sport, because these women are highly competitive, highly motivated, and that's where the education I think is awesome, because being in a male sport world for so long and then having the opportunity to teach these women about what high level, men's
Yeah.
sports has done. We're closing the gap for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I speak at conferences and I actually and go out, so there's a femininity side to that. Or I try to wear earrings at work.
I like it.
But my color would be blue.
Oh, love it. Love it. I love a good blue. So, yes, thank you for sharing that. And before we hop off, I want to mention one thing. You mentioned sometimes you talk to a coach or a life coach or a mentor. And I love that with you being a coach, because people ask me all the time, okay, April, you're a coach. Like, you don't have coaches, do you? Yes, I do. I have like four coaches, right? Like, I think it's so important to have someone know you, hold you accountable, challenge you to be better. And I mean, I hope to continue to grow until the day I die. And so I really just want to point out, because sometimes we think, going to someone for advice or having a coach shows weakness. And I think it shows strength and growth. So I love that you talked about having a coach, being a coach yourself. I think, the best in the world have coaches. So
Yeah.
what's the rest of us? And I also loved you talking about rest and recovery on our chat. So, real quickly, what did you love about our chat? And then I know we have to hop.
Oh, I loved everything. I think the parallels between sport and business and life aren't any different.
Yeah,
They're really
I
not.
agree.
So there's a lot of commonalities between the two, and yeah, appreciating that.
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing is we're all human beings trying to figure it out. So if we can just be graceful and loving to each other, I think it's incredibly important.
Can I
Um,
say one more thing before we
yeah.
go?
Yep.
So, being a women in a man's world, I don't know where I got this, but
Hmm.
I don't know if they were ideas or I read it. I really don't. But women need to support each other
Hmm.
and support themselves when they find them in a bad spot at work or whatever. So, seek challenges. So, I have three things: seek challenges,
Okay.
put yourself out there and do hard things because we want to push our threshold. Reframe your feelings in that you don't trust your initial feelings. Always go back to them and
Yeah.
question them. And then the third one is have a generous view of other people, because you can find nuances in everybody that could serve the greater good.
Awesome. I love that. My last question is always, what's your message to our audience? And see how intuitive you are? You hopped ahead of me.
Sorry about that.
No, no, I love it. I love that message. Thank you so much. So, Andrea, again, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure. I hope that we get to chat again.
Thank you.
And
Keep doing
I think,
great work.
oh, thank you. I will. And I think that we will all be watching the UConn season this year with new eyes. So we'll be
Good.
cheering you on.
Awesome.
Awesome. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.